Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. Catalog raisonnés are an essential aspect of an artist market, in particular for artists who are no longer living. For those that aren't familiar, a catalog raisonné is a comprehensive listing of all the known works of an artist. These catalogs are meticulously researched and documented, often including images, detailed descriptions, provenance, exhibition histories, and even bibliographies related to each work by the artist. One could argue that there is no catalog raisonné more important than Andy Warhol's. Not only was Warhol a prolific artist, but given the screen printing nature of his art-making process, as well as all of the individuals going in and out of his studio, known as the factory, there are questions about the authenticity of many of his works. Having a work in his catalog raisonné is the gold seal of approval in terms of authenticity. The 6th volume of Warhol's Catalogue Raisonné was just released, and we wanted to delve into the newly released volume in this week's episode with Richard Polsky, author, dealer, and founder of Richard Polsky Art Authentication. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Richard, it's great having you back on. How have you been?
How you doing, Adam? Greetings from Santa Fe.
So, as we said, Andy Warhol's 6th volume of his Catalogue Raisonné was just released. Pretty remarkable. Before we even get into the details of the volume, for an artist like Warhol, who was not only incredibly prolific, but there are also many questions about authenticity, how much effort goes into compiling the raisonné, and what's the process like to determine what's included versus what's excluded from it?
Well, okay, that's certainly a big question. I'll come to that. Just to get some housekeeping out of the way, so to speak. With the release of the latest volume, it's always a big deal. It's an art world event, in my opinion, when a new volume comes out, because Warhol in many ways still remains, I'd say, the backbone of the contemporary art market. I mean, some people would argue Basquiat has overtaken him and things of that nature, but it's still Warhol, and at least in my opinion. And the importance of his catalog cannot be stressed enough. I'll give you an example. In other words, one of the great controversies in the Andy Warhol market had always been these red self-portraits, the one owned by Joe Simon, the one that led to the lawsuit that led to the Warhol Art Authentication Board closing, and so on. But look at it this way. If this painting were included, that's, a little illustration, that might be 2 inches square, then it's $5 million to the owner. I mean, that's life-changing money. I mean, maybe not for you and me, but, it's life-changing money. And this is the power of that catalog. Do you realize, Sotheby's, Christie's, Phillips, their first question when you bring them a Warhol, it could be an electric chair, it could be a Marilyn, it could be a Mao, is it in the catalog? That's what they want to know. That's the bottom line. So here's what's so fascinating. You ask about the process and how this all comes to be. Well, at the beginning of this new volume, they go out of their way to mention that once they're done, it'll probably run through 86, maybe early 87, because Warhol died in February of 87. So I don't know if he created any works in January of that year. But when they're done, and it's going to be a while, they say they're planning to do this, but they're going to do an addendum. And they claim that is going to update information, but hopefully include paintings that they may have missed, including, you never know, maybe these red self-portraits. The reason I'm harping on that was there was a book that came out recently by a London writer named Richard Dorment. It was called Warhol After Warhol. And lo and behold, one of these red self-portraits is on the cover. And they tell the story about, why the authentication board turned these down. Well, it'll be interesting to see if these things make it into the addendum. I mean, there are a lot of things like that. We could talk for hours I mean, the catalog's brilliant. They did a great job, excellent research. I don't know how you do it better. But every catalog ever done, every catalog raisonné, whether it's Picasso or pick an artist, Johns, Rocher, they all have errors. It's the nature of the beast. Things are left out. In Warhol's catalog, I could point out a few fakes. I could point out some unfinished paintings that I don't think should have been put in there. But that's the nature of it. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and you touched on the fact that the catalog raisonné is the first thing that auction houses consult when reviewing a potential consignment. Can you elaborate on whether it's a work up for auction or even it's for sale privately or at a gallery? What are the ways in which the catalog raisonné is vital to the Warhol market and really how it operates?
It's the most important thing out there. Okay, let's say you own a classic Warhol flowers painting. And let's say it came from Leo Castelli. I think they were done around 64, let's say. All right. Castelli was very organized, and he put on the back of every painting, painting he sold, not just by Warhol, but Stella, Rauschenberg, Johns. It was called an LC number, Leo Castelli. And he did this for Warhol. Okay, an auction house like Sotheby's may say, okay, Adam, you got a flowers. Does it have an LC number on it? And if you say, no, it came from Sonnabend or something, Leo's ex who opened a gallery in Paris and showed the flowers. And they'd say, okay, do you have an invoice? Is there a Sonnabend sticker on the back? They're looking for all these details. But let's say for whatever reason, you don't have the invoice. It got lost in the shuffle over the years. The label got peeled off or fell off. But you swear up and down, no, it came from Sonnabend. This thing's good. All they have to do is open the appropriate volume, and it's there or it isn't there. And that's the difference between being in the money and not being in the money. It's real simple. It's one of the easiest things, in the art market is consulting the Warhol Catalogue raisonné.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to note is that these paintings were made in a time before really the digital world existed. When you bought a Warhol, you'd get a paper invoice from the gallery. And that, of course, is easy to misplace over time. Or let's say the artwork sold, a paper invoice isn't always transferred to the new owner. But now when you buy a new artwork from a gallery or an auction house, you receive a digital invoice via email, and it's a lot easier not to misplace that compared to a paper invoice. So that's certainly an element there as well. So the 6th volume of Warhol's Catalogue raisonné was just released. I know you've had a chance to review it closely, as well as all of the past volumes. What was your reaction to the 6th volume? Were there any unexpected bodies of work, or even specific works that were included or excluded from this volume?
Every volume has its share of surprises, and that's the fun when you get one in the mail. I mean, these things are expensive. They're $750, and you're always like, wow, I'm paying a lot for this. Hope it's good, And you start flipping through the pages, and you always come across a lot of boring things. The boring things being the commissioned portraits of wealthy individuals. I mean, it's like you don't know who these people are. And the genius of it is they're immortalized. You're like, wow, this person who you and I have never heard of, but had a wealthy spouse, had $25,000. Andy did the portrait. They're immortalized. They're in the Catalogue raisonné forever and ever. Unbelievable. But in terms of surprises, one of the funniest aspects of it is something I had never seen before. And they're referred to as punk rock Marilyns. We're talking about Marilyn Monroe paintings. They turn out, I think there are only 3 or 4 of them in the catalog. They turn out to be collaborations between Andy and Victor Hugo. Do most people, most of your listeners, do you think they know who Victor Hugo is?
No, I don't think so. Please share with us.
Okay. I will keep it brief. Victor Hugo was Halston's boyfriend. Okay. And, the clothing designer Halston, who was a major customer of Andy's, during the Studio 54 days. And Victor Hugo was his muse. He was this, really wacky boyfriend of his. He was allegedly a window dresser, but I don't know what this guy did. But he would show up at Warhol's studio and he'd screw around and he'd make Andy crazy. There was a time once he started painting on one of Andy's paintings, and Andy, not one to lose his cool. He's got that pop persona. Hey, it's all good. Well, he lost it, started screaming, Victor, you ruined it. How dare you? So he was a troublemaker. Anyway, somehow Victor was rummaging around Andy's back room and he came across 3 black and white Marilyns. I mean, these are the classic images from 1962. There was a series called the Marilyn Flavors. They're 20 by 16 inches. They were named after lifesavers. So you had cherry Marilyn, lemon Marilyn, so on. Anyway, there were a few black and white ones, just pieces of canvas unstretched. Victor grabbed them and said, oh, Andy, can I do something with these? Can I? And Andy probably just shut him up, said, do what you want. And he painted on them. And Andy signed each of them, and they made it into the catalog Raisonné. I mean, they do list them as collaborations, but it's like, wow, that's one I hadn't seen before. So there are some surprises in there.
Wow, that's really incredible. I mean, I wasn't familiar with that series. I'm a little bit surprised that you weren't, because I do consider you to be a Warhol expert.
I don't know at all. I mean, Andy produced thousands and thousands of paintings and drawings and prints and photos. Nobody knows it all. I know a lot, but I don't know it all by any means. I mean, there are a few other interesting things. One of the things that I really never looked at was he did a series of paintings called Gems, of gemstones. They look like emeralds in some cases and diamonds in others. I knew of them, but it was considered a very minor body of work. Well, they look pretty good now in retrospect. I'm not saying they're great paintings, but they're good. They're better than people probably thought. And this is one of the joys of these catalogs. You rediscover things as a collector and as an investor, possibly too. It's like, wow, these are overlooked, probably underpriced. Could be an opportunity here. And they're all well documented, so you know what you're working with.
As you mentioned, Warhol has made thousands of works. And while we all know about the flowers, the Marilyns, the car crashes, some of the other very well-known bodies of work, I've been asked from time to time by collectors who want to collect Warhol originals, but they're priced out of these very well-known series. If someone is new to collecting Warhol, but as I said, priced out of these bodies of works, what are a few series you suggest they should consider?
It's so hard because so much of collecting, it's such a complex question. Because in theory, you buy art because you enjoy art. You want to wake up in the morning and see this painting hanging on your wall. And even if you look at it for 5-10 seconds a day, you get something out of it. You get a lift. You feel good about your life when you look at it. Hey, I'm living with Warhol. I'm living with greatness. But, I mentioned the gems as an example only because there are overlooked bodies of work. It's not that everybody doesn't know what's out there. It's just, it's what's in the air. It's the zeitgeist, The gems are not in the air, but geez, they look kind of cool. They have a nice abstract quality. I mean, the catalog also has a lot of the shadows. I mean, everybody knows about the shadows. And the ones we know mostly about are the large scale ones. I think they're 6 feet tall. I think Gagosian did a show with a lot of them. Dia did a show. People have seen these, but lo and behold, in the catalog, there are all these little baby shadows. I personally think you need a few of them. I mean, like 3 in a row for them to look good where they're actually touching. But I'm guessing these aren't that expensive. I don't know the market for them, but I'm guessing they're not expensive. Just another funny aside, we talk about surprises and all that. There were, when I'm flipping through this book the first time, I saw some 22-inch flowers paintings. And they were dated, I believe, 1978. And we know they were done 14 years before that. It's like, did Warhol go back to doing flowers? Well, it turns out there's an answer to that story. And the answer is, apparently Thomas Amann, pretty big name, the Swiss dealer, is now deceased. And the man responsible for the Warhol Catalogue Raisonné, he's the one who got the ball rolling within Andy's lifetime, I believe. And he's the one who stimulated the whole project. He was the catalyst. Well, Amann became one of the great European dealers. He's Swiss. He was a Bruno Bischofberger protege, and in many ways outdistanced Bischofberger in terms of connoisseurship. That's just my opinion. I think he owned one of the shot Marilyns. He owned great, great stuff. Anyway, So it turns out he owned 5 of these 22-inch flowers. And when Andy was alive, he showed them to Andy, and Andy said they're fake. All 5 of these are fake. And they destroyed them. So Andy, sort of to make it up to Aman, because Andy was a very shrewd businessman, he made 5 more 22-inch flowers. And, to his credit, dated them 78. And they're in the catalog Raisonne. So they were, I assume, a gift to Aman to sort of pay him back for having gotten stuck with some fakes. So again, the fun stories. I mean, interesting.
Absolutely. I had no idea about those. Well, Richard, thanks so much for sharing those stories, as well as your first impressions of the 6th volume of the Warhol Catalogue Raisonné. And while we have you here, can you also share an update with us on your authentication business?
Oh, I appreciate that you asked. As I've told you before, we work with 7 artists. The big 3 have always been Basquiat, Haring, and Warhol. Liechtenstein to a lesser degree. But a lot of our business, and I'm pretty sure this is random, has been Jackson Pollock, which is sort of unexpected. But all these Pollock paintings are showing up on the market, the vast majority of which are, they're fakes. They're no good. But the stories that come with them are unbelievable. I mean, I should write a book about this. One of the things we've branched out into is art fraud. I now have what I call an art fraud service, where you're starting to see like a lot more insurance fraud, where people are putting in fake claims for paintings they claim were lost or smoke damaged in a fire. Or, people come up with unbelievable stories. And so we're trying to make our services more available to possible art fraud situations, occasionally consulting with the FBI and so on. And this has been interesting.
Yeah, the art market is, of course, an unregulated marketplace. And while the majority of people participating are great people, it does attract some bad seeds. And so I think it's nice to have guidance and help, such as what you're describing, to really help navigate some uncertain areas of the market.
It's just part of the business. Yeah, I mean, briefly, in recent times, and I mentioned Pollock, what comes to mind is there's some outrageous stories that have been circulating. A few years back, this is beyond belief, someone claimed Fidel Castro, the revolutionary leader of Cuba, owned a Jackson Pollock painting, and a classic trip painting. I mean, this is a revelation to me. I mean, Castro was a Pollock collector. I mean, there's no truth to it, And then I think it was last year, they claimed to have found a major unknown drip painting, which would be remarkable in this day and age. I think it was in Bulgaria, of all places. And the story started making the rounds in the press, but no one would produce a photo of it. So nobody could say it's like the classic. Well, if you haven't seen it, you can't say it's a fake. It's not a fake until you've seen it. It's like a backwards approach to authentication. But, this is what goes on, and you're correct. It is an unregulated market. We all enjoy being part of it, but there's a lot of bad behavior. And as the art becomes more valuable, our business experiences growth for that reason.
Well, Richard, we really appreciate having you on to chat with us about the 6th volume of the Warhol Catalogue Raisonné, as well as hear more about some of your Warhol stories along the way. And if our listeners want to learn more about the authentication business, what's the website they can visit?
Oh, I appreciate that. If they go to www.richardpolskyart.com, richardpolskyart.com, I can see my website, and they'll see a picture of me with Andy back in the day, back in 86, when I still had hair back then. And he had his fright wig, and I didn't have one. But
I love that picture of you in Warhol. We'll definitely be using that as the episode photo for this one.
Okay, Adam, take care.